Hey Brad, how's it going?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark. It's warm outside finally, and I'm pretty pumped about that. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You know why it's warm out, folks? We packed our bags and moved down to Vegas, Nevada, baby. We ain't paying taxes no more. Yeah!
He shoots. He scores.
You're listening to The Neutral Zone with Brad and Mark. Coming at you from the land of the free.
That's right, folks. Stone making the big bucks down in Vegas, eh?
Yeah, sign that big contract officially.
$9.5 million per season.
Yeah. Yes.
It shocks me,
Really?
right?
What shocks you about it?
Well, after watching Matthews sign a contract for $11.7 million, I thought that Stone would look something around there myself, you know?
Yeah, and that's going to be one of our big topics on the show here is how. So basically, when we talked about it off the air, it's the obvious part is that for places like Vegas and the Florida teams, no state tax, right? And that's a big advantage they have.
So they save some money.
They save some money, and they can attract players for a little less money than what they would pay in different cities. So that was a big part of it. I think.
Isn't that something though? Because I thought he would have signed for right around that 11.5 mark, right?
Yeah, and I think the figure I heard was the equivalent of him signing that $9.5 million in Vegas for him to sign in Ottawa. If he were to re-sign there, the equivalent was about like 12.5 or 13 million. So that's how much money he saves from not having to pay state tax, which. It's understandable with that amount of, that big of an amount of money. He's going to, he doesn't have to be paid as much. So.
And good on Vegas for taking advantage of their wonderful state.
Yeah.
And doing something like that where you're saving 3 or 4 million per season.
Yeah.
Where you can spend elsewhere. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
A huge difference.
And it's a big advantage for teams like them. Also Florida, the Florida teams, they don't have a state tax, like I said. So, those teams are able, look at Tampa Bay, right? They've signed some of their guys, their key guys, for less money than people thought they would sign them for.
I must be naive to the thing, but I've always thought that Florida was the only state that had no taxes. And after, it took it until the Stone deal before I noticed that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this about a week ago and saying, how are they going to afford to re-sign Carlson?
And they still might not be able to.
Well, you can save a heck of money. He's not going to have the same year he had the year before. He's not a 45-goal guy this year, right?
No, I think that was an outlier.
Yeah. And so now I think he's somewhere around the 20. So, between 20 and 30, I think, is where he'll be at.
20 goals, 50 to 60 points.
So you think, say, 7 million?
I would say that's probably fair.
Or 8?
6.5, 7 million. I don't think he'll be 8.
So you think you could get away with giving the guy like 6 million a year, and that's affordable for Vegas, I think.
Well, they're gonna have to lose somebody because if you look at their cap situation next year, so they're at this point right now, the cap is at 79.4, I think, for this season.
Right.
If it was to remain the same for next season, with the contracts they have and only 17 players signed, they have minus 2.9 million in cap room, I think. So they don't. So if it goes up to say around 83, 84 million,
right,
they're not on the negative side, obviously, but they still need to sign 7 guys or 6 guys, and they don't have a lot of money, especially if they're going to have to re-sign Carlson. They're going to have to re-sign Malcolm Subban. So, they don't have a lot of wiggle room there with the contracts that they have on the books already. You'll see some changes there. So I think this season, not that this is their only Stanley Cup window there in Vegas.
Right.
This is one of their really good chances, though. And they're going to be a scary. We'll talk about playoffs later. They're going to be a scary team to face in the playoffs.
Well, it was a good trade and sign by Vegas for them, and I knew that Stone would start off a little cold and take some time to build up. In these last couple games, you're noticing not the player on the ice, but you're noticing him showing up on the score sheet a little more now.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not an old guy either. He's 26, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot of time left. He's going to be a core piece for Vegas, and I think it's a no-brainer for them. He's going to be he could even be captain material for them at some point, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Look out.
At least he'll wear an A at some point, I think.
I think it's really weird, by the way, how they break down the salary and the contract nowadays. We're seeing it a lot more. I think Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, has started a bit of a trend.
Could be.
Because I don't know anyone else who's done that type of contract.
So you're referring to the signing bonuses, things like that?
Yeah. A lot more guaranteed money now. Do you think this is an indication that maybe players are a little skeptical about a lockout happening again?
I do. I think that, all the money in an NHL contract is guaranteed, right? It's not like a CFL contract or contracts in other leagues where they can cut a guy and they don't have to pay all the money.
Right.
There's protection there for the players. In terms of upfront money, though, we looked at it, and I think the minimum he makes on a signing bonus is $5 million within the 8 years of his contract, and it's some years it's upwards of $9 million of a signing bonus.
Right.
So I think what that does is he's going to get that money regardless if there's a lockout 1 year. So, it does protect him, and I think you're seeing a lot more players go that direction because they are skeptical that there's going to be a lockout.
And it's the bonus they get, correct? Because when you look at it and it's got the $9 million bonus, $3 million base.
His first year. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think it's a move in the right direction for the players. And if there is a lockout, they're going to still get paid, right?
That's the thing. It's a protection for them.
And the idea of a lockout I don't think is crazy. I personally think that the salaries are starting to get out of hand again.
Yeah, it's tough because I think NHL players are looking at their counterparts in other sports and they're saying, look at baseball players making 25, 30 million a year, football players making the same. However, you can't compare the two because you're getting how many fans to hockey? You're getting about between 15 to 18,000 in each stadium.
Right.
Whereas football and baseball, they're getting like 40, 50, 60,000 fans. So it's not the same comparison. However, I could see why hockey players want to, capitalize and cash in when they can.
So you think they want more?
I think if they could go for more, they would. I think that we're kind of at that threshold where how much further can you go? Really?
So the next Sidney Crosby that comes along, or McDavid or whatever, you think in the next couple of years the guy's going to be signing a deal like $17 million?
I don't think we'll see that happen. I think we'll see a lockout before that happens.
Well, we're pushing towards it. Matthews could have almost got $12 million.
Yeah. It all depends on if there's a lockout, and if there's not, where does the cap go?
Number 1 draft pick next year, Phil Hughes, right?
Quinn, what's his first name? Jack Hughes.
Jack Hughes.
Quinn Hughes is his brother.
That's right.
They're signing in Vancouver.
In 4 years' time, he's going to be a star. There's no doubt about it. So in 4 years' time, what is Jack Hughes going to be looking to make? Over $12 million.
If it continues on the same path, definitely. There's a lot of variables, though, right? Like we're talking about. If there's a lockout, I see the same thing happening that we've seen in previous lockouts where they'll roll salaries back.
Well, I think they have to freeze it after this year. You can't keep going up.
It just, like you said, with the cap the way it is, you can't. Look at baseball's salary cap. They don't have a salary cap.
Phoenix couldn't afford the salaries 10 years ago. And I don't think they can still afford the salaries nowadays. And I'm not sure what the minimum salary is, but it's definitely more than 10 years ago or whatever.
Oh, definitely. It's
and
like
where
any
they getting the
sport.
money from? Well, obviously the way it works, but
Yeah. It's going to be a very interesting thing to watch over the next, 2-3 years, whether there's going to be a lockout, whether they're going to have to do
is it next year
salary
that they
freeze.
need to sign a contract? Is it done at the end of the 2020 season?
That's a good question. I haven't looked to see when the CBA is up. I
Because
think
there's
it
lots
is.
of talks going on now. Little blurps come out every once in a while in the news.
People are thinking about it.
It's going to become an interesting topic, and these salaries are definitely going to keep going up and up.
Yeah.
States that can avoid the taxes, they are going to, take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect them. They have to use that to their advantage, and then obviously you see that. So
going back to Mark Stone quick before we move on, do you think he's worth that contract?
oh yeah, that's a
think so?
steal. Yeah, $9.5 million. I'm surprised about the no move clause. He is about
wants some security.
26,
Yeah.
I believe, right?
Yeah, he wants some security.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he wants to make sure he's on a contender, that he's not going to get traded at a deadline in a couple of years or whatever it might be. And players just want some stability in their life, I'd imagine. I've ever been in that position.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that the whole Stone fiasco must have played a toll on him
Yeah,
to the
most
point where
definitely.
he said to Vegas, I'm not doing that again,
Yeah,
okay? Unless I want to.
yeah. And, his brother, who plays for Calgary, his contract's up in probably a year or two.
Right,
He could join him in Vegas. I mean, you never know what'll happen.
right.
So it gives him some control over his own future, and all the power to him. So I think it definitely makes Vegas one of the top teams and one of the the contenders for the Cup. The other interesting thing about it is now which of those lines is their first line. That's
Yeah.
something else I consider. So it's always been considered that Smith, Carlson, and Marchessault was the top line. I think that's probably changed now
I
too.
think Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone are now the best looking line there.
Most definitely.
Oh,
so.
that's an awesome line. Pacioretty's coming around now again there.
Yeah.
He's been playing really good hockey. He was a little cold for a while. And now Stone's starting to heat up. He's getting used to playing on the West Coast. Getting used to playing with his teammates a little more.
Yeah, they're going to be scary come playoff time, so we'll see what happens.
The other news story we wanted to talk about a little bit was the... I didn't even know what happened until the league came out saying they're investigating a possible slur of some sort being muttered at the Toronto-Tampa game.
Yeah.
And it blew me away as to what potentially was said.
And this story actually has a couple very interesting layers. What I mean by that is, first of all, if the word, and we'll definitely won't say that word on air because it's a terrible word and there is no place for it.
Agree.
So if that word was said, then there needs to be some discipline. Now, obviously, the NHL's come out now and said they did an investigation. They talked to the referee, they talked to some of the players involved, and everybody said that that word wasn't said. So you have to kind of take them at face value. I think it's a good talking point to remind us and keep us mindful of that has no place in the sport. The other interesting layer, why I say there's interesting layers, and I'm not trying to I don't know what the right word is, I'm not trying to belittle the importance of making sure those words and that attitude has no place in hockey by saying there's interesting layers. But what I mean by that is the other argument out there is that people were saying that what he actually said was rag it, and the term ragging the puck. Now, you and I talked about it off the air. It's a term that I was familiar with. I've heard that term, ragging the puck. Right. You haven't, though, right?
No. And I asked you where you thought you may have remembered hearing it.
And honestly, I can't pinpoint one specific time. So what was surprising to me was that there was a large portion of hockey fans, and even a couple NHL players came out, at least one that I saw, they said they'd never heard that term before. So when an NHL player says that, you think, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not as commonly used as you thought it was. So I can't really pinpoint where I've heard it. I just assumed that maybe I'd heard it on a broadcast somewhere or read it in an article. That's obviously not the case, so I'm not sure where I heard it.
Morgan Rielly did play his junior career in Moose Jaw.
He did.
And that is a town in our province where we live.
Good old Saskatchewan.
So, I mean, it could very well... Is it...
Could be a regional
thing?
Yeah.
Because that's something that maybe he heard here, so...
Could be. And it could be, from the coasts in Canada. Like, there's been lots of people that you see on social media saying that they have heard it.
Okay, has anybody in the NHL said that they've heard it?
Nobody. I don't think anybody else has really come out and said anything about it. I think everybody's been very reserved about it, which is a smart approach. Mm-hmm. The player that I was talking about is Daniel Carcillo, ex-NHL player. But when you hear a guy like that say that he's never heard it in all the years he's played hockey, that tells you something, because this is a guy who came up through the hockey culture.
Right.
So if he is saying he has never heard that term, then you got to assume that obviously it's not as commonly used as I thought it was. And by saying all this, I'm not condoning. I'm not saying that Rielly didn't say that word. I'm not condoning any of that. I'm just saying that was a surprising aspect to this story that you and I were kind of talking about off air. And one of those things, right? Just a kind of a funny... It does. The only thing I will say about it is that any player needs to tread very carefully, because this is a topic that
very true, that
shouldn't be taken lightly.
What type of fine are you looking at, you think, if something like this is saying? What should the league be handing out?
Well, I think there's a suspension. I think there's been a precedent set with Andrew Shaw. He said the same word a couple seasons ago and was suspended for 2 games.
Right.
So I think that's the precedent. And
do you think it's more now?
I don't think it's more. I think that you need to make sure it's applied evenly across the board. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are saying they don't buy it, that Morgan Rielly didn't say it, and that the NHL is just covering up because it's Toronto, it's one of their the favored teams. Mm-hmm. So if the problem is if you're convinced that he said it, you're not going to believe otherwise, and if you're convinced he didn't say it, you're not going to believe otherwise. Regardless of all that, though, I think the lesson to take is that everybody should be standing on the same side of that language is unacceptable.
I personally think it should be more than 2 games.
And that is a good point.
I think that nowadays that's just a complete no-no. And I would stretch it to 4 or 5 games in the regular season right now. No, maybe not that much, but...
That's a good argument.
I would
definitely
for another stretch it to 3-4 games maybe.
So it's an unfortunate situation that happened, and hopefully if Morgan Rielly didn't say those words, that it doesn't paint him in a poor light. The lesson I think for every other player is just to be mindful and get those words out of your vocabulary if you do have them. And
that's right. There's lots of children out there looking up to you, and sitting around the ice at the glass. You see the pucks getting tossed over to them. It's an awesome thing to see, and they can hear a lot of those scrums and what's said in it, right, when you're sitting right next to the glass. So you do really have to watch what you're saying.
Very good point. And I think that it's the poor side of the old hockey culture that comes from. And that's not an excuse.
Yeah,
that's just something that needs to be removed from the game. Any word like that, not just this word.
Agreed.
Any word that is hateful towards another person or group, it shouldn't. It has no place.
No, I agree.
I think that it's a good. Like I said, it's the main takeaway is it's a good learning point for the NHL and all the players.
Agree. We're closing in on the playoffs here, Brad. You're getting down to the wire.
Yes.
We're looking at about 12, 13 games left maybe across the league.
Yeah, let's talk about something positive.
Yeah. This is the best time of year for hockey. I'm glued to the TV every chance I can get to watch a game. This is when all those teams that are battling for a playoff spot, not even battling for a playoff spot, but every team is amping their game up. They're coming out a lot hotter. They're playing harder. They're getting themselves ready for playoff hockey. There's a couple spots that aren't figured out yet, and those teams offer some of the best hockey to watch right now.
Yeah, they're fighting for their playoff lives, so they have a sense of urgency that's going to be important. And that's the other thing too, is how beneficial is fighting for your life in the playoffs, because those teams are going to come into the playoffs already having been playing playoff style hockey for 10, 15, 20 games. Whereas I think, this is an interesting topic too. You got to worry for a team like Tampa that is clinched so early. And I think they're good enough that this won't be an issue for them. However, we've seen in the past in sports where a team that's clinched really early, been able to just sit back, relax a little bit, take their foot off the pedal a little bit. It's tough to get the momentum back when the playoffs start, and you're playing teams that have been fighting tooth and nail and are engaged to begin with. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic to the playoffs once again, like it is every year. The top teams, got to make sure that they're geared up. And, you got teams like in the West, Minnesota, Dallas, Arizona, they're all fighting. You have, Montreal, Pittsburgh, Columbus fighting for spots in the East.
Well, let's look here. If we're looking at the East, then in our two wild card spots right now is Pittsburgh and Columbus. And they're sitting at 83 points for Pittsburgh, 79 for Columbus, and tied with them is Montreal. Both those teams have played 69 games, so they're sitting with about 13 games left, wherever, right?
Yeah.
They're playing the hockey. Neither one of the teams can seem to get on a roll. One game they look amazing. The next one they lose it horribly. No consistency in anyone there.
Yeah.
Even though Pittsburgh looks like they look better just because they have more points, they haven't played very consistent hockey lately either. Murray's been better down the stretch here. He's definitely come out for them. They look to be playing him a bit more. He played on back-to-back games the other night. They're really trying to use their number one guy to push him into the playoffs there. I think that's a good idea.
There's been a lot of teams both in the East and the West that aren't taking the bull by the horns and really taking over. Pittsburgh, I think, has the best chance to do that just with their experience and the talent they have on the team.
Well, I would be surprised if Pittsburgh is one of the teams that misses the playoffs.
Yeah, I would too. And on that topic, staying in the East, imagine if Columbus misses the playoffs. After paying all the price they did for the players they brought in, and Duchesne, Dzingel, they traded away a lot of draft picks, and a lot of those guys are going to be free agents at the end of the year. So if they don't make the playoffs, that's a disaster.
They have had the time to have Duchesne and Dzingel get used to playing with the team.
Yep.
In the city, playing with different clubs. And so far, in the last 5 games for Matt Duchesne, only 1 assist.
He's not having a good start to his time in Columbus. That's for sure. And they're in definite danger of missing those playoffs.
Dzingel's the same. 1 assist in the last 5 games. You didn't trade for this type of production. And this is kind of surprising because we were talking about it before. We really thought that this was going to be the difference maker for them.
We did,
but something's not gelling in that room.
And that's the danger of bringing in big names. We talked about that on one of our previous shows, that you don't often see the guys who are the big names. When they come into a team, you don't see them be the difference in taking a team to the Stanley Cup, right?
That's right.
It's usually those smaller transactions. You look at Washington last year, and it was Kempney, guys like that they brought in that were the depth players. So I think that there's something to be said for having your core in place the whole season and having those guys gel the whole season,
right,
and adding in the complementary pieces and not the pieces that are supposed to take you on your first line.
Do you think that Panarin just wanted to be traded? Do you think that it surprised Panarin that he wasn't and that they made this move?
It might have.
And he's still saying that. Well, good move, guys, but it doesn't change how I feel about this team.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be there. It could be it. You got a lot of they're probably the team that had the most pieces, new pieces come in. So you have a lot of guys who are trying to gel with each other. Mm-hmm. Whereas a team like Vegas, they brought in the biggest piece. However, that's only one guy that they got to have gel with the rest of their players, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not upsetting 3 of your 4 lines. It's just one line that you're taking the time to have them get used to each other. And let's be honest, that line with Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone, you're talking about 3 veteran guys, 3 guys who are been at the top of the league. So I think for guys like that, it's probably a little easier to gel. Whereas maybe some more inexperienced players, it'll take a little more time.
Columbus had to play Pittsburgh 3 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. They lost 2-1-1. That's why there's this little difference between them right now. Those were important games for Columbus, and unfortunately, they're only able to win 1. They're not playing that great down the stretch here. Bobrovsky has been really good the last 4 games for them. I think he's only been allowing 1 goal a game or so. But still, they're not able to win the games,
If I was going to pick a team to miss the playoffs out of the 4 being Carolina, Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Montreal, I would say that Columbus is probably the one that's going to miss. I just think that they're too much of a mess right now. I think that Montreal, despite their deficiencies that they may have, that you could argue they do have, I think that as a team they'll pull it through. That's just my personal opinion. And
Montreal has really kind of been falling off a little bit lately.
They have. I think that they just had their little bit of a lull, and I could be very wrong here. I just think that Montreal will squeak in. I don't think they'll go very far in the playoffs. I just think that they'll squeak into that last seed and see what happens.
Well, somebody's got to catch on fire here. Last 10 games, Pittsburgh's 6-2-2, Columbus is 5-5, Montreal's 5-5. Whoever can just 7-3, 8-2 in the next 10 games, they're the team that's going to make it into the playoffs here.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
With Montreal, it's just one of those teams have to step up and win a ton of games down the stretch here to do it for you. It looks like Montreal would be the odd person out here just because of the goals against difference, which actually isn't very much, by the way. Columbus is a goals against of 204.
Yeah.
And Montreal is a 207.
Yeah.
So that
it's
could really
close.
And then their goals for, I'm just looking at this. Their goal for is Columbus is 209 and Montreal's is 208.
So +5 and +1.
It could really be even all the way across. I'm not even sure what they go to after that to decide
I'm not sure.
The breaker.
We'd have to look that up.
If that was all tied, honestly.
I think it's row, which Columbus does have the advantage. They have 37 and Montreal, I think, has 34.
Okay.
I think that you can pretty much say that Carolina and Pittsburgh are going to be in the playoffs. Carolina has been probably one of the best teams since the All-Star break. So, which is surprising. Again, another team that didn't really make any moves, if any at all, at the deadline, and they've just been gelling, right? Because they've had the entire season. They're they're really just finding their groove, and they kept Michael Furland. They kept all their key players. So I think those 2 teams will definitely make it. Out west, I think that's going to be a little bit more interesting of a race to watch, with Dallas, Minnesota, and Arizona. Colorado too's in there a little bit, right? It's going to be very close. I think the top 3 in both divisions is pretty much set. I don't think you're going to see, with the way St. Louis has been playing, I don't think you're going to see that change. So it's really just those last 2 wild card spots in the West that we're going to be watching.
Yeah, let's look here. It's really close. Arizona, I'd love to see Arizona pull it together here and make it in. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They're rolling. They could definitely jump ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota's 6-2-2, even though they got rid of Mikko Granlund. I liked Fiala and what was the other guy who came in from Boston anyway?
Oh yeah, Donato.
Yeah. I think that's working out really good for them.
They've been good. And they've got some.
The top line there with Zucker and Donato has really been rolling for them.
Yeah, and they've got some good goaltending from Dubnyk lately.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting. And I guess in that vein, who are your picks to like? Who's the top picks for you in terms of? Let's talk about Stanley Cup favorites right now. Out west, out east. You got anybody picked in your mind?
Well, no doubt, Tampa Bay.
Obviously,
in the East. I think that's a hand-down, easy selection over there.
How about a second team?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's really tough to pick from because there's a lot of good teams after Tampa Bay. I mean, Boston's looking very dominant in the last 20 games here. It does look like, I think right now they're losing tonight again, and they just got beat by Pittsburgh the other night to break it up. But still, an amazing run of 19 games, not losing in regulation. They're a hard-nosed playoff team that battles hard against everyone.
They've got some experience there.
It's going to be a really tough fight for Toronto. I think my take on it is if Toronto can battle in the end of the year here and pull ahead and get home ice advantage, that I think that might be their TSN turning point.
For sure.
But with so little games left now and still 4 points back of Boston, it's going to be really tough to close the window on them there. But if you're looking at anybody else, Washington's really good. They've been playing they've been playing better hockey lately.
Yeah, you can't count them out beating the Stanley Cup defending champs.
Carolina's coming along really, really strong too.
It's tough to pick one or two.
I could see, just of a Cinderella team, say, for a second pick. The team I would pick would be Carolina.
That's a good pick. I think that they're sneaky good for what they bring to the table. How about out west? Who you got picked out west?
The West is the toughest, I think, to really pick anybody there.
Those top 6 teams are all St. Louis. Who saw St. Louis being there? But
I would easily scratch out St. Louis. Okay, I think it's really a 5-team battle for where it comes out. Winnipeg is not playing good hockey down the road here. Some people think that they're saving it now for the playoffs. I don't think you should be saving anything for the playoffs. Get on your horse and
you got to be gearing up right now.
Fly in there.
Yeah.
If you are a top seed team and you're going into the playoffs, and say Arizona squeaks in the last one, and Winnipeg ends up playing Arizona, I'd say Arizona wins because they are way hotter than the Winnipeg Jets are right now.
That's a good point.
That could be a first round upset. In my mind.
It could very well be. I mean, Arizona doesn't score a lot of goals, but they have extremely good defense.
Yeah.
And they could shut if a team like Winnipeg's struggling to score, they could shut them down. So I mean, I don't think there's any real easy matchups. I think if I'm a team, say the 3 teams in the Pacific being San Jose, Calgary, Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Calgary and San Jose, getting that first place is probably the most important. Because who wants to play Vegas in the first round?
Yeah.
Not like I wouldn't want to do it. I watched it. The Calgary games and Vegas games they've played recently. They played 2 in the last week and a half, and they were really close games. On paper, all the numbers pointed to like 2 teams that were very evenly matched. So I think you got San Jose, Vegas, and Calgary. They're all very closely matched teams. Mm-hmm. That it's a coin toss of who's going to come out of there.
If I had to pick one, I would say out of the West, I'd say the Calgary Flames. Not only are they scoring the goals, but their defense has also been really good this year.
If I was going to pick one, I would probably say Vegas.
You'd say Vegas?
I think that Vegas they've built a really good core of players, and they obviously enjoy playing for each other. I think they have all the different aspects of playoff hockey covered.
Yeah, you got to see that let's not say the top line, but let's say the Marchessault line. You got to see that Marchessault line start gearing up a little more. They haven't been producing as much, and I think they've been struggling a little bit there.
It would be interesting to see their comparison to second lines in the league and how well they're doing in comparison to second lines to know how they match up. Because, like I said, I think at this point now you can safely pencil in that Stastny line. Like, it might not, on paper, they might not be listing it as mm-hmm. such. I think, though, it's pretty obvious that that's the first line. So the reason I picked them is just, like I said, they've been through the playoff battle already. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals last year and lost, so they've got that experience that teams like Winnipeg and Nashville have that maybe Calgary doesn't have.
Right.
And so I think, like I said, I think it's a toss-up, but I think that might give them the edge. San Jose, I mean, you can't count them out either.
I don't think they have the goaltending. I think that's really going to be their fault.
And I would say the same for Calgary.
Who do you think is winning in a series against San Jose? San Jose against Calgary, who wins?
Calgary.
San Jose versus Vegas, who wins?
Vegas.
And why?
I think for two different reasons. Vegas, I think they have the goaltending. Like I said, they just have all the aspects covered. They're not, and unlike last year where they were good across the board, they're good across the board with finally a line that I think you can call an elite first line or close to it with the Stone, Stastny, Pacioretty line. So I think that's just overall they come at you in waves, and I think that will overwhelm San Jose.
Right.
Especially with the goaltending issues they're having. Calgary, I think they can fill the net like nobody else. San Jose, you saw them scoring a lot of goals for a while there because that Evander Kane line heated up. However, they've
Kane's
cooled
out
off.
still.
He's out.
Yeah.
They've cooled off. I just think. Now, I'm not saying it'll be close too. Whether it's Calgary against San Jose, Vegas against San Jose, any of those three teams playing each other, it's going to be such a close series. I think the reason that you want to finish first and get a wild card team is because whoever comes out of that first round between those three teams, whichever two play each other, they're just going to be beat up, and it's going to be a tough, grinding 6 or 7 game series. So if you can get a matchup against a team that's not quite as tough, and again, you don't want to discount teams like Minnesota or Dallas or Arizona.
Right.
It's not the same as playing against one of those three big dogs in the Pacific, or playing like Winnipeg and Nashville.
Well, you're hoping that Evander Kane comes back for San Jose soon too.
Yeah.
And helps out there. They definitely miss his presence. He's been amazing for them this year, especially since the All-Star break, it seems.
The only knock against Kane would be, have you seen the amount of penalty minutes he has this year? I think it's like 159 penalty. I mean,
he took 31 penalty minutes in one game alone. Actually, I think it was just before his injury, right?
Yeah, he's been a little undisciplined.
Mm-hmm.
However, he's counteracted that by scoring a good amount of goals, putting points for them. So
they're winning those games.
And the thing,
I think he's a borderline bad agitator. Somebody that maybe is disliked more in the NHL, but
in the vein of Marchand.
Yeah, because you don't hear about him all that much, but when you watch the games, he's definitely a very scrummy guy.
And like you said, the teams who are their rivals, I mean, they're not going to like the guy because he plays that style of game. So it'll be very interesting.
If you're looking at the Central Division, I think that if Nashville finishes where they do, I think they love it. They go up against St. Louis. St. Louis is in trouble right now with Tarasenko sidelined still. Mm-hmm. They're looking to reevaluate him in the next 7 to 10 days, I think, right now.
Yeah.
If he's not there, if he can't get back a couple games before playoffs, that might be a bit of a troublesome note for them.
Could be.
I think he's definitely somebody that needs to be in their lineup, obviously, for him to win. But if Nashville gets St. Louis without a Tarasenko or a Tarasenko at 75%, I think that's an easy win for them. And then they would have to face a Winnipeg team who's also beat up, missing Dustin Byfuglien still, correct?
Yeah, whether he's coming back, who knows when he's coming back.
He came back for a little bit, re-aggravated injury, correct? And now he's gone again. So you're really facing some banged up teams over there. If I had to pick another team in the West, it would definitely be Nashville.
Yeah, I think they probably have a little bit of an easier road to the second round, third round, whatever it might be. So that's a good pick. I mean, you can't count out Nashville. Look how good they've been the last several years. So
yeah, if you just quickly, but if you pick a Cinderella team, you're looking down in the wild card. There is a chance, because they haven't been ruled out yet, that teams like Colorado and Edmonton could still potentially push in there. Chicago. Vancouver would have to go on a hell of a run, but
I think Vancouver's done.
Okay, so out of these three teams, Colorado, Edmonton, Chicago, who do you think has it the best shot of making that Cinderella run at the end of the year here to get at that last wild card spot?
Chicago,
without
a doubt, just because of the experience and the players. They've had some players step up in the second half of the season and fill some roles that they needed.
Edmonton
is DeBrincat. I always say his name wrong.
You know what? The DeBrincat in the line there with Strome and I can't remember the other guy. They've really cooled off, and I think that's what Chicago's fault's now been. They really hit their high a little too early.
And that's, this... And you look at all three of those teams, right? Colorado, Chicago, Edmonton. They all have reasons why I don't think that they'll pass Arizona. Arizona's played the way they have they've lost they've had some of the most man games lost in the NHL this year, and they've still managed to have the record they do. And all those guys are starting to come back healthy for them. In Colorado, beyond that top line, which Landeskog looks like he's out for the remainder of the regular season, possibly into the playoffs. So they've already lost him too. Even with him in the lineup, they don't have much scoring depth beyond there. Chicago, like you said, they have guys who carried them in the middle part of the season, and now they've started to cool off. Right. Because they're younger guys, that happens. And Edmonton, how Edmonton's been sticking around is amazing. It speaks to some of the character there. I just don't think they have the depth.
Well, I think a cranky McDavid is helping a little bit.
That could be it.
And Draisaitl seems unstoppable. They're 7-2-1 in the last 10 games there in Edmonton. But some of those wins have kind of come against teams like Ottawa, Buffalo, Vancouver, New York. They lost to Toronto. And the one notable win that looks nice for them was beating Columbus 4-0. That's pretty good. Before that, they were losing to Nashville, Toronto. They have strung some wins together here. I don't think it is impressive when you kind of look at some of the teams they're beating. No offense. But they got a hard schedule coming up, facing teams like Vegas, St. Louis, Columbus again.
They have a tough schedule at the end. And that's the thing, looking at that team that is the most concerning, I think should be the most concerning for fans.
Yeah.
They have the players on that team like McDavid and Draisaitl who can drag that team to victory in a lot of games, especially against the lower teams. However, they probably can't compete with the big dogs when it comes to, to right down when the rubber meets the road. So you have a team there that's going to keep you just outside of the playoffs. And that's going to be for the next foreseeable future. Because we're not talking about guys who are in their late 30s and are at the end of their career and they're just keeping the team relevant because of that. We're talking about guys who are going to be your core piece. So you're never going to get another first overall draft pick, most likely. Although with where they're at now, they're close to that too. But I don't think it'll happen. I think that's the danger. They're always going to be picking in that 10 to 12 spot. So you're never going to make the playoffs, or you're just going to squeak in. But you're never going. So you're kind of in no man's land there, right, in Edmonton. So that would be concerning to me, just because where do you go from here? Can you trade one of those two guys and justify it? Can you trade Draisaitl and justify it? It's a tough situation to be in.
I still think in the off season, once you get your whole front office sorted out, they're still saying that they're going to take their time, find the right GM for their team. They're going to be patient with this process. It doesn't look like anything that will be solved anytime soon, which is fine. But I think in the end of the day, I believe that trading someone like Jesse Pulviari right now in this offseason would be a smart move for him.
It's probably the move you'll see happen.
If he rockets off next year and he takes off and he becomes a hell of a player, perfect. But if he tanks one more year and doesn't look like he's a fit in the NHL, the price is going to start dropping on him. Exactly. You won't have the same value there. So I think you trade him away now while the value's still up there, and use him to help start a quick rebuild over.
Yeah.
You could trade him for some experienced guys somewhere, but they kind of got some bad contracts right there.
They're in a tough spot, and hopefully they turn it around. Hopefully they get a GM in there who can do a good job and make some savvy trades, bring in some players. So we'll have to see what happens there. However, going back to the playoffs, I honestly think that it's going to be two of the three of Dallas, Minnesota, Arizona. I just think that Colorado's close. Chicago and Edmonton are close. I just think that they all have issues that will hold them back. Now, I could be very wrong.
So what's your call? Name two teams that make it there. I think it's Dallas, Arizona.
I think it's Dallas, Arizona. I would agree. I think that Minnesota's it's gonna be close between Minnesota and Arizona, and I think it's gonna come down right to the wire. But I have a feeling that Arizona's gonna get in.
And in the East, we're saying Pittsburgh, and you think Montreal.
I think Montreal.
I think it's gonna be Columbus.
Fair enough.
I think they'll get it. I just looked at the last 3 games that Montreal's going to play. I think it's against Tampa, Washington, Toronto.
Yeah.
In their final 3 games of the year. That's pretty tough.
That is.
If you're going to look, by the way, I'm just looking over to the East since we did a Cinderella name for the West. In the East, you do still have teams in the hunt below that in Philadelphia, a bit of Florida. I'm not going to include Buffalo. Florida went on a scoring spree last week, it seemed, but still couldn't really pull too much else ahead. I think if any of those teams might make it, it would be Philadelphia out of either one of those. But
they have the players. It's surprising that they've had the poor season that they do, but it all boils down to goaltending,
right?
And hopefully for them, Carter Hart is that guy, and so they could make it. I just think they're not going to go very far,
right?
So we never really talked about this, but getting close to the end of the show here, do you have a 4 picks for who's going to make it to the finals, like the conference finals?
Yes, if I were to say for the conference finals, I would say, and I can't really look at a playoff tree and see how exactly it goes,
right.
But if I wanted to see a conference final, I think it's going to be something like, let me think about how this is going to break down. I think it'll be Tampa Bay against Washington in the East, and if I go to the West, I think it's going to be something like Nashville against Calgary.
Okay.
You?
I would say out East, you're going to see, Tampa Bay is probably the no-brainer, but like I said earlier, who knows? They might go into the playoffs having taken their foot off the gas, and it could come back to haunt them. However, I just think that they're a really good team. So, yeah, I'll pick them too, and I think they're going to actually be facing Carolina. I think Carolina, you're right, I think Carolina's going to be a surprise team and might be able to pull it out. So I'm going to go out on a limb and pick Carolina. And out West, I'm going to say Vegas and Nashville.
Vegas and Nashville.
That's what I think is going to happen.
That's surprising, Brad.
I just think the way Vegas and Nashville, the experience that they both have had, combined with the rosters that they have, that's who you're going to see.
I just think that if it's a Calgary-Vegas first-round matchup, I know the kind of the knock against Calgary is their goaltending, in a sense, but I think the scoring power there, I know Vegas has it too, but I think that Calgary has more depth. And I think the real difference maker in a series like that is going to be Tkachuk.
That's a good point. He's that type of player. He's built for the playoffs,
and he wants to get paid more than Stone did.
That's true.
So him showing up and having a good playoff run would benefit him very much.
And a surprise player for Calgary could be James Neal.
Yeah, that's right.
He's the type of player who's built for that playoff style hockey. Mm-hmm. So and he's been to 2 straight finals. It could be a very Marian Hossa-esque story where he goes to 3 finals in 3 straight years and finally wins in that 3rd year. That would be one of those stories that would be amazing to watch. So I think he could be a sleeper. He's been hurt the last little while. Looks like he's going to come back just in time for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting addition for them.
And I think Neal against Vegas is a bit of a storyline as well, right?
Yeah, coming from there last year. So.
Yeah, it would be an amazing round to watch.
Yeah. The only other thing before we let each other go here, Mark, is what do you think of the playoff format the way it is?
Well, I think it's got to get changed up.
I mean, this
Big
is a whole nother show probably in and of itself.
I'm not going to get into why I don't like this, but I don't want to see Boston and Toronto face off against each other, every year. And then after that, whoever wins that
faces Tampa.
That one has to face Tampa.
It's a tough. I agree. I think if it was me,
those are the three best teams as far as I'm concerned in the East.
For sure,
is Tampa, Boston, Toronto,
and I think it needs to go back.
And they're all going to be facing each other.
It needs to go back to 1-8.
Absolutely.
It's all seeding based on not within each division. I agree. I think it needs to go back. So maybe we can do a show on that in the off season. But I think that we're in agreement on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of wraps up for our show today, folks. If you liked what you heard and you want to follow us along and not miss another show, please subscribe to our podcast wherever you are, whether it might be on iTunes or Google Play as well. We also have a Twitter account. You can find us there. Just search up The Neutral Zone. And we also have a Facebook page if you want to come out there, and we make sure we just post every episode up on there so you can catch up with us there and kind of learn a bit more about us as well.
Yeah, just on Facebook, search The Neutral Zone Canada. On Twitter, we're at Neutral Zone CDN. So give us a follow and take a listen to all our episodes, and we're happy to come back again.
That's right. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Peace!